The doctors refused to perform the autopsy. When they finally forced themselves to cut him open, they found a stomach the size of a bathtub, organs swimming in pus, and an esophagus so wide you could drop a tennis ball straight into his gut. This was a 26-year-old man who died claiming he'd eaten a golden fork. He was lying, but the truth was so much worse. He drank the cat's blood first. The French army turned him into a human briefcase. Staff kept finding him eating the corpses of the dead. Then a baby disappeared. This is the story of Tarrare, and you're honestly not ready for it. France, 1789. Most families were starving, and the average person ate maybe 1,500 calories a day if they were lucky. 17-year-old Tarrare, though, was eating the equivalent of 8 people. But here's what will mess with your head. He weighed barely 100 pounds. What was happening to all of that food? When his stomach was empty, he could wrap the excess skin around his waist like a belt made of his own flesh. But that's not even the weirdest part about his body. Wait until you see what his mouth could do. But here's something I haven't told you yet. We're going to discover that Tarrare wasn't alone. There were others, and when you find out what happened to them, you'll understand why this case has haunted doctors for over 200 years. His parents tried everything, doctors, priests, even exorcisms, but eventually they just kicked him out. They thought they were solving their problem, but they had no idea what they'd just unleashed on the world, because Tarrare was about to discover something about himself that even he didn't know, something that would turn him into France's most terrifying spectacle. Picture this. You're walking through Paris in 1788. Then you see a crowd gathered around some skinny kid. What happens next will make you understand why animals ran away from this man. His mouth could open 4 inches wide, but that's not the disturbing part. The disturbing part is what he did with it. I'm about to show you exactly what Tarrare could eat, and I promise you by the end of this list you'll be questioning whether this man was even human. Because what started as simple tricks escalated into something that defied every law of biology. Corks, normal enough I guess, stones, getting a little weird, live eels, then he moved to entire baskets of apples in one mouthful, then he moved on to live snakes. But here's the detail that'll haunt you about that last one. He'd bite off the snake's head, then slurp down the rest of the body like spaghetti. A spaghetti made of hundreds of razor-sharp bones that should have shredded his internal organs. How was he still alive? The crowds loved it though, but they had no idea what they were really watching, because this wasn't just a street performance. Tarrare's body was actually processing all of this. We're talking about a biological impossibility walking around in human form, and it's about to get so much worse. Everything went wrong though during one show. Tarrare collapsed mid-performance. His intestines had basically just given up. And after they saved his life with industrial-strength laxatives, grateful Tarrare offered to eat the surgeon's pocket watch. The surgeon's response? If you swallow that watch, I'll cut you open to get it back. Little did anyone know, in a few short years, doctors would be cutting him open anyway, and what they'd find inside would change medical history forever. It's now 1792, war breaks out in France, and Tarrare thinks armies feed their soldiers, right? Little did he know he was about to become the French military's most disturbing pet science project. They gave him quadruple rations, food for 4 grown men, gone in minutes, still hungry. But here's what nobody understood yet. Tarrare's hunger wasn't just big, it was wrong in every sense of the word. Like his body was actually missing some fundamental piece that made him human. His condition got so bad they hospitalized him, and that's where he met Dr. Pierre-Francois Percy. And Dr. Percy was about to conduct a series of experiments that were so disturbing, so unethical, that even by 18th century standards, they were completely insane. But here's the thing. These tests were going to reveal something about Tarrare that nobody was prepared for. Something that would turn him from a medical curiosity into a legit weapon. Experiment number 1. Percy prepared a meal for 15 German laborers, massive meat pies, 4 gallons of milk, and then he gave it to Tarrare. And Tarrare ate everything in minutes. Then something happened that made Percy realize this wasn't just an eating disorder. Tarrare's stomach expanded like a balloon, but his body temperature spiked. He started sweating profusely and emitting this smell. And I'm not going to describe that smell yet, but by the end of this video, you'll understand why that smell was actually a warning. Experiment number 2, a bucket of live eels. Tarrare crushed their heads and swallowed them all whole. Bones, scales, everything. Now, experiment number 3 is where Percy crossed a line that should never have really been crossed. They brought him a live cat. And what Tarrare did next made Percy realize he wasn't studying a patient anymore. He was studying a predator. Tarrare grabbed the cat, bit into its belly, drank its blood first, then consumed the entire carcass except for fur and bones. The medical notes include this chilling detail. The dogs and cats fled in terror at his aspect, as if they had anticipated the kind of fate he was preparing for them. Animals could sense what he was becoming. But here's what's really going to mess with your head, and this detail becomes crucial when we get to the missing baby later. Tarrare wasn't enjoying any of this, at least not apparently. He was described as mentally absent, zombie-like, only alive when he was consuming something. What if this wasn't an eating disorder at all? What if something else might have been controlling him? After months of watching Tarrare eat literally anything, and I mean anything, trash, animal, anything, someone in the French military had what they thought was a brilliant idea. What if we turn him into a human briefcase, so to say? The plan they came up with was so insane, so ridiculous, that when I tell you what happened on his first mission, you'll understand why this story became legend. Because they were about to send Tarrare behind enemy lines with a secret that could have changed the entire war. The plan: Tarrare swallows documents in wooden boxes, crosses enemy lines, and then, in a nice way, retrieves the messages from his own waist. The French military actually thought that this was a genius plan. Mission number 1: carry vital military secrets to a French colonel imprisoned by the Prussians. Plot twist that'll actually blow your mind: there were no vital secrets. The message just said, "Hey, confirm you got this." This was actually a test run, but nobody told Tarrare that. So Tarrare is crossing enemy territory thinking he's carrying information that could save France, when really he's just a human guinea pig in the world's most elaborate prank, so to say. What happened when he got caught is going to show you just how far his condition had progressed. There was 2 major problems with this plan. 1, he couldn't speak a single bit of German, and 2, his desperate food-seeking behavior had gotten so bad that it made him impossible to miss. Within hours of being in Prussian territory, locals spotted him eating garbage and called the authorities. And what happened next broke him completely. The Prussians tried interrogation techniques that were brutal even by their standards. They chained him to a latrine, hoping the documents would come out naturally. When that wasn't fast enough, they tried enhanced interrogation. Severe beatings, mock execution, the full medieval treatment. Eventually, they just gave up. They decided he was either completely insane or the most committed method actor in history, and they just sent him back to France. The message was retrieved from his waist, but by then nobody really cared. The spy career was over, the plan had failed, but Tarrare's final transformation, so to say, was just really beginning. Tarrare returned to Dr. Percy's hospital, traumatized and begging for a cure. Percy agreed to try everything, but he had no idea he was about to create a monster. What I'm about to tell you represents the point where Tarrare stopped being a medical patient and became something else entirely. The treatments Percy tried didn't just fail, they seemed to almost make Tarrare's condition evolve, like it was adapting or getting stronger. Dr. Percy proceeded to try laudanum, or liquid opium. This just made him more aggressive. He tried wine vinegar, no effect. Tobacco pills, no effect. Massive quantities of eggs. It just seemed to make the hunger worse. Nothing worked, but something was changing. Tarrare couldn't stick to controlled diets anymore. At night, he'd sneak out to fight stray dogs for rotting meat. But eventually, rotting meat and fighting dogs wasn't enough. The next part of this story is so disturbing that other doctors demanded Tarrare be transferred to an asylum. But Percy was just too fascinated to let him go. And this decision was about to maybe cost an innocent life. You see, patients undergoing bloodletting started noticing their blood disappearing. Staff found Tarrare drinking directly from the collection basins, like he developed a taste for human blood. But eventually blood wasn't enough either. Bodies started disappearing from the morgue. Not entire bodies, just pieces, parts, like something was almost snacking or sampling them. Staff eventually caught Tarrare multiple times attempting to consume human flesh. Fresh corpses, old corpses, it eventually didn't matter anymore. Then the unthinkable happened. A 14-month-old baby vanished from the hospital. Gone, no trace, no witnesses. Now here's the detail that's going to chill you to the bone. There was no evidence Tarrare was actually involved. None. But remember what I told you about animals fleeing from him? Well, the hospital staff had started doing the same thing. They could sense what he'd become, and everyone knew exactly who was responsible. At this point, Percy could no longer protect him. Tarrare was thrown out and disappeared into the streets of Paris. And that should have been the end. But monsters don't just disappear. It's now 4 years later, and Dr. Percy gets an urgent message from the Versailles Hospital. There's a patient here who says he knows you. He's dying and he's asking for you specifically. When Percy arrived at that hospital, what he found was going to answer every question about Tarrare's condition. But the answer was so horrifying that Percy would spend the rest of his life trying to forget it. It was Tarrare, now 26 years old, dying, claiming he was being killed by a golden fork he'd swallowed. Percy examined him and immediately saw the real problem: advanced tuberculosis. But there was something else, something that made Percy realize the truth about what Tarrare had been all along. Tarrare died within a month of continuous diarrhea. Even in death, Tarrare was extraordinary. His corpse began decomposing so rapidly that it seemed like his body was still consuming itself from the inside. And when they finally performed that autopsy, they discovered something that shouldn't exist in nature. The smell was so overwhelming that trained surgeons initially refused to even cut him open. When they finally forced themselves to do it, they found the answer to every question about Tarrare. And it was worse than anyone had actually imagined. His esophagus was so freakishly wide, like a tunnel straight from his mouth to his stomach. His organs were swimming in pus. His liver and gallbladder were massively enlarged to over 3 times their normal size. But his stomach was the real revelation. Tarrare's stomach had essentially consumed his entire torso. It was enormous, diseased, and had displaced most of his other organs. This wasn't an eating disorder. This was a complete biological transformation. And they never found that gold fork he'd been talking about, because there probably never was one. Tarrare's condition had progressed so far that he'd lost track of what was killing him and what was just another meal. Now here's where this story becomes absolutely impossible to believe. Tarrare wasn't the only one. What I'm about to tell you is going to make you question everything we just talked about. Because if this was just a rare medical condition, why did it only appear in one specific place at one specific time and then vanish completely from human existence, never to be seen again? Charles Domary, Polish soldier, born 1778, nearly identical symptoms, same time period, same region. His menu, 174 cats in 1 year, and when cats weren't available, 4 to 5 pounds of grass daily. But here's the detail that'll give you nightmares. During naval battle, a sailor's leg was blown off completely by cannon fire, and Domary immediately grabbed the severed leg and started eating it before his crew wrestled it away from him. He tried to eat a fresh human leg from his shipmate. When captured, the British were so fascinated they ran experiments. Domary ate 16 pounds of raw meat, organs, and candles in 1 day. No adverse effects whatsoever. Then there was also Jacques de Falaise. Third case, same area, same time period. 3 men, same impossible condition, same place, same time. Then nothing. These cases vanished from medical history like they never existed. But here's the question that's going to keep you awake at night. What if they didn't vanish? What if they just got better at hiding? Revolutionary France was in chaos. Records were destroyed. People disappeared. Perfect cover. Medical historians wonder if environmental factors during the French Revolution created the perfect conditions for these cases. Or maybe something else was happening. Something we're not supposed to know about. On a more science-based note, though, modern medicine offers theories: hyperthyroidism, brain damage, and genetic disorders. But here's the problem that haunts researchers. No modern case has ever come close to these symptoms, and maybe none ever will. I'm going to leave you with something that'll mess with your head a little bit now. In 2023, author A.K. Blakemore wrote a novel about Tarrare that became a bestseller. Literary critics called it one of the most disturbing books ever written. But here's what's really disturbing. Blakemore spent years and years researching this case, and she came to a conclusion that most people aren't ready to hear. She doesn't think Tarrare was entirely human. Not metaphorically, literally. Tarrare died at 26 with no answers, no family, no explanation for what he'd become. But here's my final question for you. We found 3 cases of this condition or similar in revolutionary France between 1770 and 1800. Then nothing. Complete medical silence for over 200 years. What are the odds that a condition this extreme just disappeared? What if it didn't disappear? What if it evolved? What if right now, walking among us, there are people with Tarrare's condition who've just learned to hide it better? What if the next time you see someone with an unusual appetite, you should be asking yourself, are they still entirely human? Just jokes, of course. But always remember, check what your neighbors are eating.